am so excited to show you this new project I'm working on. So this is for a really dear and close friend of mine that I've had for many years. Her mother's moving in with her, and she'd like to give her a beautiful dresser that's creative and matches her personality. So today, I'm taking this old, worn-out chest of drawers and turning it into a stunning decoupage masterpiece. I'll walk you through the entire process from prep to final reveal. If you like DIY transformations, hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's get started. First, let's remove all the hardware. Now, grab your scraper and heat gun. I'm using a heat gun and scraper to remove this old laminate top. Make sure to apply heat directly on top of the laminate. If you heat underneath, you risk burning the wood you're trying to keep. Now, if you want a more detailed tutorial on how to remove laminate, I've got a separate video linked for you. This took me about 45 minutes total, so take your time and let the heat do the work. Also, be careful what tools you use. I tried speeding things up with a mallet, and believe me, it left some ugly gouges in the wood. Now I've got extra repairs to do. Now that the top is off, we can prep the surface. Top is exposed. There's still a stubborn layer of adhesive to deal with. I grabbed acetone, chemical gloves, fine steel wool, and a scraper. Oh, and don't forget your protective eyewear. The acetone helped, but let's be real, it didn't get everything. So I pulled out the big guns, paint stripper. Now listen up, this stuff is strong. So once again, put on a chemical mask, chemical gloves, and protective eyewear before using it. I laid it on thick and let it sit for 20 to 25 minutes before scraping. Had to repeat the process a couple of times, but that last application, it got the job done. Now, once the adhesive was finally gone, I used paint stripper wash to clean off any leftover residue, then followed up with a wet microfiber towel. Next, I sprayed TSP substitute and wiped it down with a wet microfiber towel again. This stuff is a game changer, but don't forget your chemical mask because you don't want to breathe this in. I gave everything a final wipe with clean water. Leftover degreaser can ruin your paint, so don't skip this. Did the same for the drawers, and now we're ready for repairs. I patched up the holes with Bondo wood filler. It dries fast and cures to a durable finish. Perfect for covering large holes and gouges. Once it's set, I smoothed it out with 80 grit and even glued and clamped a few loose joints overnight for extra strength. The next morning, I prepped the surfaces by scuffing them up and finishing with 220 grit for a flawless finish. For the bottom base, I sanded right down to raw wood, using my Surf Prep sander with sponge pads at medium, fine, and then very fine. These pads work wonders on curved areas. After a final wipe down with the damp cloth, everything's prepped and we're ready for decoupage. So this is the first time I do decoupage, and it may be yours too, or maybe not. But for some of us beginners, we don't have a shelf full of colors. So let me tell you the ones that I picked. I picked my base, which is antebellum blue. Isn't it gorgeous? I am so in love with this color. And then I picked caviar black. And I also picked their color fluff, which is white. This way, use it on your own, or if you mix or blend with the base, you could do shadowy areas, darker areas, you could do lighter areas, and I think that's a good start. So let's get to it. So I completed taping the bottom. We're ready to do the paint wash. Very easy. I'm using this small little cup because a little goes a long way. I literally just took this paint stick, dipped it in the paint maybe 3 to 4 times. Very little. The paint went up to here, not even a quarter of this cup, and filled the rest with water. The look that I'm looking for is a very light wash. I'm not looking for a lot of color. This is up to you. You can use as much paint as you want. A lot of times I do 50-50, 1 part paint to 1 part water. I'm using Dixie Belle Chalk Mineral Paints, and I'll link all the products below. Before diving in, I planned exactly where I wanted the decoupage to go. I also painted a base layer of white in those areas. This little trick makes the colors pop once the paper is applied. Now, this paint dries fast, about 20 minutes, and then we're ready for decoupage. I started at the top applying a thin, even layer of decoupage gel about 2 to 3 inches wide, where I want the paper to begin. Then I carefully placed my decoupage paper, making sure it was level, no tilting allowed. Once I got it just right, I lightly pressed the top edge with my fingers and decoupage tool. This part is so satisfying. I grab my decoupage tool and work from the center outward, pressing the paper down smoothly, making sure there were no air bubbles or wrinkles. I repeated this process section by section until the entire decoupage was beautifully applied. Taking your time here makes a big difference. Once the paper was fully adhered, I used a razor to score the excess paper, making sure I had clean, crisp edges. Quick tip: when painting with chalk paint, lightly mist your brush with water for an even, buttery smooth finish. Then I got creative. I cut out extra pieces from the decoupage paper and placed them in other areas I thought would look pretty. This is where you can really make it your own. To lock everything in, I applied an even layer of decoupage gel over all the paper, making sure to go over the edges too. This seals it in completely and prevents any air bubbles from forming. I let it dry overnight, and the next morning I carefully scored the drawers open with a razor. But the glue was stronger than I expected, so I had to grab a scraper tool to pry them open. And just like that, the decoupage is done. But this transformation isn't over yet. Want to see the magic happen? Click on part 2, where I take this piece to the next level with gorgeous paint effects, epoxy scroll details, and of course, the final reveal. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Click the link and I'll see you in part 2.